Let's jump right in. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the tactical character study of Portugal, Croatia, and the Ronaldo dilemma. We're breaking down literally one of the most chaotic, emotionally draining, and frankly, tactically fascinating matches of the entire tournament. Look, whether you're a diehard fan or just a neutral who loves the tactical chess match of international football, you got to admit, this game was an absolute roller coaster. For decades, seriously, decades, the Portuguese national team has been built entirely around the massive gravitational pull of one man. His legacy is etched into the very fabric of the country's sporting history. But today, well, we saw a glimpse of a totally different future. We went from this incredibly stagnant, suffocated first half to one of the most action-packed and dramatic second halves we've ever seen. We've got a ton to unpack here, from brilliant veteran displays to a managerial gamble that honestly shifted the tectonic plates of this entire team.
Okay, let's dive into this because this is the absolute core dilemma at the heart of our analysis today. Did taking Cristiano Ronaldo off actually save Portugal's tournament? For nearly 20 years, CR7 has been the undisputed focal point of this team. His importance to the squad's identity? Utterly unmatched. He isn't just a player, he's been the ultimate safety net for an entire nation. When the system fails, you give the ball to Cristiano and he pulls out some impossible victory. That psychological edge, the sheer terror he strikes into opposition defenders just by stepping onto the pitch, it's a gravity you just can't quantify. He's a living legend who has carried this team time and time again. But in a do-or-die knockout match, we saw a monumental shift. The aura clashed with physical reality. So we really have to ask, did removing arguably the most important player in Portugal's history actually save them? Or was it just a desperate roll of the dice that happened to pay off?
All right, moving into Section 1, a dramatic knockout thriller, surviving the chaos.
Deep into extra time, the tension in that stadium was absolutely suffocating. Croatia genuinely thought they had secured a miraculous equalizer. The celebrations had started, the bench went wild, and Portugal looked dead to rights. But then, the stadium holds its collective breath. The VAR screen lights up and it reveals something incredibly sci-fi, an EKG-style graphic. Inside the match ball is this deeply fascinating internal technology that actually detects microscopic touches using sound spikes. It behaves almost exactly like a heart rate monitor, measuring contact that is completely invisible to the human eye. And as we all waited in agonizing suspense, this granular scientific precision showed that the ball had grazed a Croatian player in the buildup, meaning the final touch was offside by practically a hair. It's a stunning level of detail that literally decided the fate of two nations in the blink of an eye.
No way, right? Now, while the technology absolutely ensured fairness to the letter of the law, man, did it exact a massive emotional toll. Seeing a legend like Luka Modrić, at nearly 40 years old, by the way, putting in this effortless masterclass of line-breaking passes, running the midfield with the energy of a guy half his age, only to have it end on a microscopic technological technicality, that is profoundly tough for any football fan to watch. Modrić and this incredibly hardworking Croatian midfield gave absolutely everything. They left every single ounce of energy out there on the pitch. So yes, it was the correct call, but just a devastatingly cruel way to say goodbye to a Legends World Cup dream. On to part 2, the Ronaldo tactical dilemma, analyzing a stagnant attack.
To really understand how we got to that desperate, chaotic finish, we kind of have to rewind and look at this wildly jarring statistic. 1. A single touch. Cristiano Ronaldo played 81 minutes in this match, and prior to scoring his penalty, he had exactly one touch of the ball inside the opposition box. Just let that sink in. For a player of his historic caliber, a guy whose entire identity and tactical purpose is built on dominating the penalty area and ruthlessly finishing chances, this stat is absolutely staggering. I mean, if the greatest goal scorer in the history of the sport isn't receiving the ball in dangerous areas, we really have to evaluate what he's offering off the ball and why the whole system is failing to serve him.
So the crucial point here is understanding the root cause of this systemic failure. Portugal set up in a standard 4-3-3, but they severely lacked any real pressing from the front line. And because the forwards were incredibly static when out of possession, it basically gave a free pass to Croatia's veterans. Guys like Mateo Kovacic were just allowed to easily drive the ball right through the middle third without any resistance. The result? Portugal's midfield was constantly overrun and outnumbered. Offensively, it wasn't much better. They resorted to these painfully predictable U-shaped passing patterns. Vitinha to Neves, out wide to Leao, and right back again. They looked almost like a rigid low-block team, just desperately trying to hold possession, rather than actually attacking. Plus, Roberto Martínez completely failed to use Bruno Fernandes centrally in that first half. Pushing their most creative playmaker too deep or way too wide left him visibly throwing his arms up in frustration because it isolated Ronaldo entirely from any meaningful service. "If we don't run, we don't play." This quote right here perfectly captures the harsh reality of modern tactical systems. Look, for 15 years, Cristiano didn't really need to press defensively because his offensive output was essentially a mathematical guarantee of success. But in top-tier football right now, managers demand that defending starts from the very tip of the spear. If the forwards don't press, the entire defensive structure behind them just collapses. Against Croatia, Portugal's front line was offering little more than token gestures. And when you don't track back to disrupt the opponent's rhythm, your midfield gets stretched thin, and you invite exactly the kind of suffocating pressure that let Croatia completely dictate large spells of that second half. All right, Section 3. Martínez makes the call, pushing the chips all in. So, the clock strikes the 81st minute. It's tied 1-1. Croatia is actively slicing through Portugal's midfield, and manager Roberto Martínez is staring down a do-or-die tactical decision. And he did the unthinkable. He benched Cristiano Ronaldo. We really need to pause here and acknowledge the sheer staggering weight of this decision. This is a seismic event in Portuguese football history. Managers have literally lost their jobs for far less. Taking off a player of Ronaldo's historic stature, a global superstar carrying the hopes of an entire nation, in a knockout match, that risks an absolute media firestorm if they end up losing. Martínez had taken intense criticism for being way too conservative in the past, but with his back completely against the wall, he looked at his nation's idol, and he made the hardest call in football. And this brilliantly illustrates what happened next. By taking Ronaldo off, Martínez completely changed Portugal's shape and identity on the pitch. They immediately shifted away from that stagnant 4-3-3 setup where the midfield was just constantly getting exposed to counterattacks. Instead, the manager throws on Ruben Neves to act as a defensive shield, adding a much-needed extra body to stop the bleeding in the center of the park. At the exact same time, he brings on Gonçalo Ramos, a highly energetic, mobile striker, to dynamically revamp the attack. It transformed them from a static, predictable unit into a highly flexible, hard-working machine, a real game-changer. Which brings us to part 4. The super sub strikes. Gonçalo Ramos to the rescue. The payoff for this massive managerial gamble was literally devastatingly effective. Let's walk step by step through the winning sequence. First, by introducing a highly mobile striker, Portugal finally had someone actively darting between the lines, making runs and physically occupying the Croatian center backs. This relentless movement created just enough chaos to stretch a really tired defense. Then, in the dying moments, Rafael Leão finds a pocket of space and whips a desperate yet impeccably precise cross into the box. And finally, because Ramos is positioned perfectly, exploiting a momentary lapse in concentration from that exhausted Croatian backline, he rises up and buries a powerful, match-winning header right into the back of the net. Boom. What makes this substitution even more profound is the sheer, ruthless efficiency of Gonçalo Ramos. Just look at this number, 47. He astonishingly averages a goal every 47 minutes during his World Cup appearances. That's insane. Contrast that devastating 47-minute efficiency directly with Ronaldo's struggle to secure a single touch in the box over 81 minutes. It just highlights the stark, uncomfortable difference in mobility and output on the day, proving exactly why a fresh, dynamic presence was the absolute perfect antidote to Portugal's tactical stagnation. He's as much of a super sub as we've got in world football right now. This quote completely validates every ounce of the manager's faith. Ramos just thrives in these exact scenarios. He's developed this incredible knack for bagging late, game-changing goals precisely because he brings the raw energy required to break down a tired defense. It's something the aging superstar simply couldn't provide in the sweltering heat of this specific match. Ramos did exactly the dirty work that a modern number 9 is supposed to do. He pressed relentlessly, occupied multiple defenders, challenged aggressively in the air, and finished the job under immense, tournament-defining pressure. Section 5. Ronaldo's role moving forward. The sacred cow, no more? So, Portugal has officially entered a new reality. The superstar is no longer untouchable. By breaking this massive taboo, Martínez has proven to the world, and honestly more importantly to the locker room, that this squad can dynamically thrive without their captain on the pitch. This psychological liberation gives the manager ultimate tactical authority moving forward. It also opens the door for heavy striker rotation depending on who they're playing. And crucially, Ronaldo clearly recognized this reality. He was seen celebrating the winning goals super enthusiastically from the touchline. That demonstrates incredible leadership, despite his undeniable competitive ego, unifying the squad and proving that keeping the team in the tournament is the ultimate priority for everyone. But moving forward, we have to objectively weigh these tactical trade-offs. And let me tell you, it is an agonizing puzzle for Roberto Martínez. If you start Ronaldo, you get his immense aura. You get historic, clinical finishing, absolute reliability from the penalty spot, and the sheer terror he puts in defenders' minds. But you definitely suffer from minimal defensive pressing and stagnant off-ball movement. On the flip side, if you start Ramos, you get high mobility, aggressive high pressure to disrupt the opponent's midfield, and a constant aerial threat. But you sacrifice that unparalleled veteran experience and the ultimate clutch factor. Balancing legacy against tactical necessity is the absolute tightrope this team has to walk now. Finally, part 6. The ultimate test. Spain awaits. Can Portugal adapt? And they're going to need a perfect solution immediately because their next challenge is a virtually flawless Spanish side. Spain has been putting on these clinical, suffocating performances, totally controlling games without conceding a single goal so far. Their midfield, which is full of technical maestros who are incredibly press-resistant, will ruthlessly expose any lack of defensive effort from Portugal's front line. Seriously, if Portugal's forwards stay static and fail to press, exactly like they did in the first 80 minutes against Croatia, Spain will casually hold 75% possession and pass absolute circles around them, choking them completely out of the tournament. Which leaves us with this massive, lingering question. Portugal absolutely possesses the raw talent to go all the way and lift the trophy. But succeeding in modern football requires relentless energy and absolute tactical discipline. So, can Portugal beat a perfectly tuned machine like Spain if their most important historic player starts? Or has this dramatic knockout thriller proven that, for the sake of this system, the bench must be his new tactical home? It is the ultimate dilemma between legacy and reality. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.